Hello, Manchester, and welcome to another edition of Girard at Large. I am your supremely coiffed host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. As you know, you can still find us online at girardatlarge.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Also at Girard at Large, where we encourage you to like us and to follow us. Why? Because now more than ever, it's important to make sure people are getting the information that we are putting out there to make sure everybody knows what is what and what isn't. We are also on Gab, Codius, MeWe, Minds, Parler, and Tumblr. Also at some version of Girard at Large or Rich Girard, or you'll be able to find me. Follow us there. It's important to build these alternative social media networks. I'm also on LinkedIn. And that way, as things start to come down around the ears of the tech giants that are messing with us, we'll be able to have alternative outlets. And I have to tell you, some of them are really nice platforms. And, I'm enjoying the time there, although I don't get to spend much of it. All right, so we have a big show tonight, and without further ado, Brendan, am I looking at the computer to talk to our guest, or is she going to pop up on the screen there?
Pop up on the screen.
Pop up on the screen. Okay. Those of you who watch the show are probably familiar with a lady named Anne Marie Banfield. She is an education advocate in the state of New Hampshire, has been for more than 2 decades, probably pushing 3. And she's actually nationally known for some of the work that she's done to advocate on behalf of children, academic excellence, core curriculum, and a whole variety of things, not the least of which is ensuring that students are school districts are not violating the law. And she very well may have caught the City of Manchester School District red-handed, violating laws that, were passed specifically to prevent what the school district appears to have done. And we have to say appears. And Anne-Marie will explain now. Let's bring her on the screen. Anne-Marie, thank you for joining us from the comfort of what looks to be a really nice sunroom.
It's exactly where I'm at, a really nice sunroom. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, great to have us. So Anne-Marie, I'll let you sort of take the story from here. Tell us what you believe the Manchester School District has done to violate, by my reading, at least 1, probably 2, and depending on what they do with this right to know request that you're dealing with and have been for weeks now, 3. So I'll let you take it away.
Sure. So I was contacted mainly because I tend to post. I'm sure some of your viewers have probably seen my posts on social media, on the Manchester pages. And I tend to post things to keep parents informed. I know I have a lot of Manchester residents who follow me, a lot of Manchester residents who ask me to share information. And I did that regarding a lot of what's coming out about this critical race theory and some of what we're seeing in the school in terms of race relations. And so I had posted something along those lines, and I had a parent reach out to me, a Manchester parent, and say that one of her kids took an implicit bias test or survey in her class. And I said, well, okay, did you give permission? Because state law requires parents to...
Anne-Marie, can you hold on just a second? Paul, is there any way to turn up the volume?
Not for you, but I have a clean, nice, loud feed.
Okay, so sorry, Facebook Live, I can't get the volume any better.
Okay, so she contacted me and said that her child had taken this implicit bias test by Harvard, and I had asked her, did you consent to this? Because this requires your consent. And she said she does not recall ever consenting to this. And I said, well, did they post this survey online? Or make it available to you, because this is also within the law. And she said, not that she saw. Well, and I thought, it doesn't sound like they followed the law, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know. So I filed a right to know request. That was on April 7th. And I asked questions. I asked about all the records in terms of any assessments or tests or questionnaires that have to do with the student's social behavior, family life, religion, politics, sexual orientation, sexual activity, drug use, or any other information related to a student's academics. Any non-academic survey along those lines has to be confirmed and approved by a parent because of so much information that they're collecting on students now. And this is personal information. This is information that you don't know where it's ending up as a parent. So we passed a law several years ago that requires parental consent. And then I asked also for a copy of all the questions that they were required to answer, a copy of any privacy policy from the vendor, privacy policy from Google Classroom, since that's how that they were conducting their classrooms, and a copy of the parental permission slip on the non-academic surveys. And then I also asked for a link to the questions that they made available in the district, assuming that they followed the law. But I had my doubts. And so that was April 7th. And I got a response that said something along the lines that they were looking for this information, but wasn't really able to find it, and that they were working on it. I said, well, let me direct you to where you might want to look, because clearly they must not have known about the survey. That's what I assume. I could, again, be wrong. And I said, why don't you look at Humanities 3? And why don't you look for the Harvard implicit bias test? And lo and behold, I got another response saying, oh, that link was sent by the teacher through Google Classroom. And I said, well, then if that's the case, can you please respond to my right to know request? I want to see the permission slip. I want to see all this information that I asked for. And I got no reply back. So then I sent out another request, and I said, okay, here's how this is all worked out. And, I mentioned that, I first filed the right to know request, that I got this response back. And I said, and because we have a law in place that requires written consent of a parent or legal guardian, and that the school district shall make such surveys or questionnaires available at the school or on the school district's website for review by a student's parent or legal guardian at least 10 days prior to the distribution to students, I figured this stuff would be easily accessible and could easily be sent to me. If they followed the law, they should easily be able to get this information, because they should have made this information available to parents. I still have not received this information. I was told that it will be sent to me by May 28th. Now, again, this was April 7th that I requested this information. So do I know for sure that they violated this law? At this point, no. But given it's been just about 2 months, at least a month and a half, to get information that should easily be accessible. If a teacher followed the law, if the school followed the law, this would be easy to send me. And yet I don't have it. So I just want to make sure that parents in the district are aware that they should be looking at this, especially if they have kids that are in that class. I don't know, I just heard from one parent, and I don't know about any other parents that have kids in that class, or anything else being done in the school district. Are they surveying or testing other kids on any of this non-academic stuff without your permission? And if that is the truth, if that is happening, then they are violating state statute. So that's what I wanted to bring to your viewers' attention, especially the parents that are in the district, that they may have violated the law. At this point, if I do find out that they are in violation of the law, I will continue. I will continue. I don't know exactly how that's going to go. I don't know exactly what happens when a school district does violate a law like that. I don't know if I need to contact the Attorney General. I'm sure that that'll be my first call, and then I would like the school district to let the parents know that their kids took this test, and check the privacy policy. And I would be looking to make sure that information was destroyed. And I would also encourage everybody to go take the test.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about the test, Anne-Marie. Tell everybody, because I actually took the test. And it seems to me it's more of a test of one's reflexes than it is anything else. But tell us what the test is and what it is supposed to measure and why it's a problem that violates state law if the district, the teacher, the school, whoever didn't actually follow the law?
Well, it's kind of like pseudoscience. It's supposed to measure your bias, your racial bias. And there's a bunch of questions that you have to answer. And if you actually do a Google search of this implicit bias test from Harvard, you're actually going to find another article that says it's been debunked. Like, this kind of testing of students' attitudes and values is really pseudoscience, and you really can't measure this, because not only are you supposed to take it once, you're supposed to take it a few times to see if your attitude changes at all. And it seems to me, I mean, if you took the actual test, it seems to me that no matter how you answer, you're going to have bias somehow. And you just kind of wonder, like, is this really something that you can measure in a student, in a child? And what are they coming away with? What kind of message does that send to a student that is very sensitive? I got a call from a parent not too long ago that is coming across a lot of this critical race theory information, and she has a son, and I want to say he's around 10 or 12. I don't know his exact age. He has special needs, and he's very, very sensitive. And his cousin is Black. His mother is white. His father is Black. And they've grown up together. They are the best of friends. They're the best of buddies. And, when we were talking, her concern was if something like this is thrust upon him, where he is made to feel guilty or bad because he's a little white boy and his cousin is Black, how he would react to something like that. He would be devastated. And these are the kinds of things that this is pseudoscience in the classroom. They have no idea how these kids are going to respond. And we've had parents across the country saying that this is dividing friendships, that there are kids looking at each other now with suspicion, and that that they feel that this is dividing them instead of unifying them. And they were unified before, and now it's almost like this kind of approach is dividing them. So something like this in the Manchester schools, how do they know how this is going to impact these kids? I mean, why aren't they doing something positive, something uplifting, something that unifies them rather than assigns collective guilt to some of these kids? And that's exactly what this stuff does. It assigns collective guilt to kids that I think these younger generations have to be some of the most accepting, non-judgmental kids that you're going to find. And yet now you're going to, divide people by race and, impose feelings that are not warranted, and collective guilt. And that's what we're finding. So I would encourage your parents to really look at this. What is going on in the schools? Start asking questions, ask the teachers, ask the administrators. What kind of information are you giving to our kids? Is this helping them to become better human beings so that they care for each other, that they're compassionate based on, just anything? I mean, just bringing kids together instead of dividing them. How are you approaching this subject? Those are the questions to ask, because this may be fine for some, but it may not be fine for others.
Anne-Marie, we're going to have to leave it there, but I thank you for giving us an update, and I'm sure you'll let us know once you get the right to know request information.
Right, I will.
All right, that's Anne-Marie Banfield, education advocate here in the state of New Hampshire. Anne-Marie, once again, thank you, and I'm sure we'll be chatting soon.
Okay, thanks again.
Bye-bye. All righty, folks, and I apologize to our Facebook Live audience. Apparently, you couldn't really pick up the audio. I did post a link to stream this live, so hopefully some of you were able to get to that. Now, we do have a busy agenda, but on the agenda right now at the planning board here in the city of Manchester is yet another attempt by an illegally operating sober home. This one has 13 people out of 15 that are not from the city of Manchester, or more specifically, do not have the people who did not have a prior address in Manchester. They come from Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, and all over the state of New Hampshire in this place. And they are trying to get the planning board to agree that they are, quote, a family, which if the planning board does, not only does it mean that this triple-decker with 18 people, including the compensated employees, one on each of the 3 floors, who live in this triple-decker, if they succeed in getting the planning board to say, yeah, gee, you're right, you are a family, then they don't have to abide by any of the zoning, life safety, or other building codes that govern the business that they are, or any similar businesses across the country. The good news is, I guess, the Mount Calvary Nursing Home can walk in and say, gee, we have all these unrelated people here, but we eat together, we do activities together. We're a family, so we don't have to be governed by your stinking codes anymore. But they're trying to get the planning board to recognize them as a family so they don't have to comply with the life safety codes, the building codes, the housing codes. Well, they probably still have to comply with the housing code, or the zoning, which means of the approximate 60 illegally operating so-called sober homes here in the city of Manchester, they all will immediately become legitimized if any entity in the city says, yep, you're a family. And that would be a complete travesty, because not only would the city lose any and all regulatory authority over these illegally operating organizations, not that the city's doing a hell of a lot now to attack the dozens of them that are around the city. Many of them they know, because the former fire chief, kept the list, which he later denied having. But some of my more research-savvy neighbors actually found between 2 and 3 dozen of them advertising themselves online as sober homes in Manchester when they were illegally zoned and not complying with any life safety or other building codes. And we turned that all over to the city, which the city has not done anything with, of course. So in the alternate, they're saying, well, gee, if you don't buy that we're a family, we'll agree. And I think they're compromising on family because they know the city doesn't have a leg to stand on. The city actually did a really good job in a letter it sent to them in February, just tearing their arguments apart and using multiple court precedents to show that the city is on firm ground to enforce its codes. But they said, well, okay, if you won't consider us a family, then you can call us congregate housing, and we're allowed in this zone by right, which they are. But they're trying to skirt around the idea that they're a change of use, which requires planning board approval, and they're trying to get away from the fact, and calling themselves a congregate living facility, they're trying to sidestep an agreement they entered into with the state fire marshal, in which they agreed they were a rooming house. And the fire marshal in that agreement said as long as they continue as a rooming house, they'll waive the state-required sprinkler systems that belong in the rooming house. And as the city told them in the letter back in February, look, you can't claim to be a rooming house with the state, but something else with us. And by the way, we have the document. You agreed that you were a rooming house. When you first came to the planning board, you applied as a rooming house, and now you're trying to say you're something else. That doesn't work. These are people who, by the way, have every respect, don't you know, for the city's government, the neighborhoods, the regulatory environment. They're fully cooperative, don't you see? And, I did send a letter of testimony because I had a conflict before getting here. I'm here. I can't be at the meeting. I will publish that letter so that everybody knows the arguments that I made and where I came down on it and why. But I would be okay if the planning board said, yep, you're a congregate living facility, However, you must comply with all of the life safety codes that govern these facilities, because two sets of rules? I mean, there's a little something under the United States Constitution called the Equal Protection of the Laws Clause. It's the 14th Amendment. You can't have the rules applied differently to different because of who's there. I think they call that discrimination. So I'm a little worried about what the planning board might do tonight, because if the planning board does say, hey, you're a family, you can bet that if they decide to go for their variance hearing in June, which they still haven't applied for despite multiple extensions on Orange Street, they're going to say, hey, planning board called us a family. We don't even need to be here. So that could have catastrophic effects on the neighborhoods in the city. And you need to understand something. They're positioning themselves. Listen, as you know, I really don't have anything, quote, against sober homes. I don't. I just want them to follow the rules that every other business in the city has to follow. So when people say, hey, there is no regulation for these things in the city, that's wrong. There are definitely regulations for this thing in the city. And it doesn't matter to the city whether or not it's a sober home, a college dorm, an elderly retirement home for priests, or anything else. They look at how the property is used, not for whom it's used. So and there is a big difference and a big distinction between the two. And the city has all of the regulatory tools it needs in order to regulate these entities. All it has to do is use them. So much of what I've proposed as mayor, whether it's with these sober homes or with the homeless vagrancy issue, is to use the tools that we have at our discretion. And when we choose not to use the tools at our discretion, then we can't complain that the problem keeps getting worse. And so if you think the city's got a problem with these things now, wait till something like the planning board says, hell, you comply with the definition of family. There will be an invasion. And so when they go there and say, oh, well, not only do we not, degrade surrounding property values, yet listen, I've seen properties in my neighborhood next to these things try to be sold. They absolutely affect property values. But we're actually improving public safety because we're keeping these recovering addicts off the street in safe, sober homes. And that may be true. But this one operator who used to have two in my neighborhood and now is down to one because the neighborhood defeated one at the zoning board. Between these two properties, they have 26 residents, and only 9 of them have prior Manchester addresses, which doesn't mean they're from the city. It just means they have a prior address somewhere in Manchester. And they come from multiple states and all over the place. And what happens when they, and I suspect there was a death recently at the one of a resident at the one on Orange Street, because one of the cars parked out front had the woman's name, rest in peace with the date, May 3rd. And I looked up the name because I had the documents from what they gave the city. And yet, sure enough, the name of the person who was scrawled on the back of the car's windshield was a resident there. So hopefully I'm not connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. But the people in these situations are prone to relapsing. It's a sad fact of recovery that not everybody makes it. And so if you're bringing in so many people from outside of the city, how are you making Manchester's streets safe if you have people from Portland, Maine, Burlington, Vermont, multiple communities in Massachusetts, and Maine, for that matter of fact, and more communities than you can shake a stick at here in the state of New Hampshire? How are you making it safer for the residents of the city of Manchester when the majority of the people you're serving aren't from the city of Manchester? if you look at the proposal that I put together to deal with the homeless vagrancy, and that is really frustrating right now because I'm helping some neighbors in a particular area where the police have posted, hey, you're gone in 10 days, which is great, except in the meantime, they're trespassing, they're disturbing the peace, they're crapping and peeing everywhere, they're shooting up drugs, they completely upended the neighborhood, and I'll be damned if the police are doing anything about it. I've corresponded with Chief Oldenburg about it. This is a complete and total nightmare, and this is happening all over the city. And I linked to a number of newspaper articles that I used in, that I used in formulating my my homeless vagrancy plan. And you will find interviews with people in these camps who are getting, thrown out of the camp. And many of them interviewed were people who had been thrown out of sober homes because they relapsed or they otherwise violated the rules of the sober home. Okay, so why is someone from Rochester in Veterans Park or at the courthouse lawn after failing to survive in a sober home? Because he's not in Rochester. That's why. Why is he here? Because we're importing them from all over, folks. It's just something that we have to get a handle on and be honest about. So this is really harrowing stuff. And I'm the only one so far. Victoria Sullivan has accused the neighbors who don't want these illegal things in their neighborhoods as NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And the mayor's making pretend. The mayor who once had similar rhetoric, right? Oh, we need these to help get out of the opioid crisis, and these people need all this. Okay, great. So as a result of that mentality and that attitude, they're all over the city and they're destroying neighborhoods everywhere. Now neighbors are being attacked because they want the zoning and the building and the life safety codes followed like everybody else has to follow them. And this thing could completely upend any kind of real public safety effort if the planning board makes the wrong decision. Eddie, you're on the air. Thanks for calling in. You're on the air, Eddie.
Hey, Rich, I caught the DVR version of your last week's show, right?
Yeah.
And you were talking about school choice, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I got a quick question for you. When you talk about school choice, okay, I guess it goes without saying it's on a space available basis, right? Because if 90% of the city wants to send their kids to Green Acres, well, you can't do it. Am I right?
Maybe. And what I mean by maybe is in my plan, Eddie, I have money follow the child. So if every child comes with dollars and Green Acres takes a look at all of the kids who want to come to their school and they do some math and they say, we could bring some portable classrooms onto our property and we could take in more kids because they come with dollars and we'll be able to afford to do it, then it's not necessarily the case that kids would be blocked out of a school. The other thing you could look at there is it's not so much the school, so much as it is the program in the school. So let's just say you had a situation there where, a school is or could be way oversubscribed. Well, at that point, that means there is at least one school and probably several that are very undersubscribed. And maybe you just do a building swap and say, the classical building at Central is totally empty, but if we used it, we could, all these kids who wanted to be at Green Acres Elementary School could be at Central. I mean, that's a bad example because it's a high school, but maybe it's Northwest, maybe it's Goslar, maybe it's some other elementary school. So I think there could be ways to accommodate more kids being able to go to a school than the school itself will physically hold. And the other thing I'll say about this, Eddie, is that my guess is that if in my plan, because money follows the kid, if the principal and the teachers look at it and say, gee, do we really need to have a separate art room? Can we do art on a cart? Do we really have to limit ourselves to X number of kids in a school? Is 15 really the number, or can we put it up to 18 or 19 or whatever the numbers be? I have a feeling that because there's that economic incentive with money coming to the child, they'll find ways to bring more kids in than they claim they can have in the schools today.
All right, so we're not going to see a scenario where kids that live near a certain school would be told, well, listen, you can't go to this school even though you live 57 yards from it because we have school codes and there's X amount of kids that want to go. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. And no, I mean, honestly, I think that's one of the things that would have to be worked out by the, the task force that I would appoint as mayor or once elected mayor to figure out what we do in those scenarios. I know in the superintendent's proposal, right, he still holds on to attendance districts, and he gives people in the attendance district the right to go to that school, and only allows people who might want the magnet program that he's talking about having at any given school to go there if there are available if there are available slots.
It's available, right?
Right, but so what he's really saying is he's allowing inertia to stay in the system. He's allowing the people who, live across the street, so to speak, to have dibs on a school that someone across the city might want to go to because of the program that it has. So I think you have to.
But I kind of agree with him there, though, Rich. That's kind of the method that's been in place for years. It's like that's why you have the system that you currently have. It's like I don't know if method to madness is the right way of putting it, but
well, Eddie,
if you have a kid that lives literally across the street from that school or two or three blocks away, then that kid should have priority to go into that school.
Eddie, I'm not disagreeing with you, but the point that you're missing here is that because the superintendent is determining in his plan that certain schools will have certain programs, you have to ask yourself whether or not every kid in that attendance district wants that program. And if the kid doesn't want that program, where does the kid go if everybody else doesn't have room because they give right of first refusal to the kids who are in the attendance district? So you don't really have a choice program at that point. What you have is a determination by the school district that you're going to have certain programs in certain schools, whether the parents in that attendance district like it or not. And if they don't, they can only get out if somebody somewhere else in a school they want to go to creates a vacancy for them to go to. That's what they're doing.
How much different can the elementary schools be? I mean, come on.
Actually, Eddie, they can be very different because there are any number of different curriculum or methodologies. The Montessori approach, for example, is very, very different than, say, a dual immersion approach, or the Common Core is very different than the standard algorithm. A school that wants to use all the touchy-feely whole word language and new math stuff, is not going to use, phonics and things like that. So. In my proposal, Ed, I actually give it to the people, and your wife's a teacher, right? So I actually give it to the people in the buildings and say, you have certain strengths and interests, you have certain talents, you've observed firsthand the needs of the children in the district. What would you design to attract that money? And it's and this is all within the public schools, right? I'm not saying they can go to Catholic school or public charter school, although I do open it up. I do suggest that people come forward and start charter schools that are governed by the Manchester School Board, not the State Board of Education. Most people don't know that under New Hampshire law, local school boards can actually charter schools. Okay, so that's a Manchester public school if it's a charter school. Granted, it under state law could operate by different rules, but it's still funded by the Manchester Public Schools and it's still overseen by the Manchester School Board. It is a Manchester school at that point. So I think the parents working with or the faculty working with the parents, working maybe with local businesses or nonprofit organizations, et cetera, could come up with some really interesting, exciting plans that would offer a lot of great options. I'll give you an example, right? Goldhart, and I'm not opposed to magnet schools. In fact, I'm actually fostering in my plan the creation of magnet programs within the schools. But Goldhart has said, well, we're going to do 2 dual enrollment schools. We're going to do one at Webster, and it's going to be half a day in French and half a day in English. And then we're going to do one, I think he picked Beach Street. It's going to be half a day in Spanish and half a day in English, right? Okay, great. Well, what if I live in the Webster School District, the Webster School Attendance District, and I don't want my kid taking school half a day in French? Well, unless I can find...
Does he mean the whole school?
Yes, it's called a dual immersion school. So the whole school would be focused on it.
Let me leave you with this quick question.
Well, hold on, Eddie. Let me just finish what I was going to say. Then you can ask your question, right? So what if I live in the Beach Street School District and I speak Arabic? Okay, and I speak Arabic or some other language, and I don't want that. Now I have to find a school somewhere that's got a place for my kid that doesn't speak or want to speak Spanish, just like in the Webster School District. If they don't want to be in a dual immersion school with French, they'd have to find a school somewhere else. So that's what they're doing, and it's what happens when you have a top-down bureaucratic approach to determining what options will be available and at what schools, and then say, well, we're going to maintain the attendance district, get everybody's squatters' rights, and people can only come in if there's actually room for them to come in. But in order for people to leave, there has to be room for them to go to. That's why I don't like the approach. I applaud the attempt to innovate and provide the options, but it has the district determining what will be where instead of letting the educators in the buildings say, hey, I think we can and should do this here because. Okay,
right.
Your quick question.
What do you think of the plan to increase the credit? Like, it's currently 20 to graduate school. If they want to go to 28, I think it's ridiculous. Tell me what you think. I'm going to hang up and thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Eddie. Well, you know, the numbers of credits only tend to matter. I'm kind of agnostic on the question, and I'm not usually agnostic on things. To me, the number of credits that you're required to have should reflect those things that provide you with proficiency, basic competency, if not excellence, in the subjects that you study. Okay? Anything beyond that is gravy. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that number is 20 credits versus 24 or 28 or whatever the case may be. But I am going to say in a system where there's actually school choice and you have certain graduation requirements, and those requirements are focused on your academic achievements, your ability to function, to read, write, do arithmetic and all that fun stuff, then yeah, we should move it along. All right, I'm going to take a call from Randy here, and then we're going to get on to the main event. Randy, thanks for calling in.
Hi, Rich. How you doing?
Unbelievable.
First-time caller, long-time listener.
Thank you, sir.
And Rich, about 10 years ago, I recall reading an article in the Union Leader that spoke to the fact that in the city of Manchester, the largest employers were both the city and the state combined. And if that's an accurate statement, that the residents, the largest employer, are two tax-funded businesses, if you will.
Yep.
Is that a bad proposition for the future of a municipality in terms of their books, their budgets, and just setting up shop when you're just getting everything from taxes? Thank you, Rich. Best wishes.
Randy, thank you for the call. And I will tell you, Manchester now, including federal aid and things like that to the schools, is almost a $400 million enterprise. And that is not chump change. It's one of the reasons why I'm running for mayor. It's because I think whoever's mayor ought to have a direct experience with it and ought to have demonstrated competency, if not a little more than it. And yeah, I kind of think it's problematic that the city is the largest employer in the city and that the state combined with the city by far makes it. The last time I saw any numbers about that was the potential merger acquisition of CMC and Elliott, which would have made the hospital the largest employer. So it has been a while since I've looked at those numbers, but if Manchester isn't the number one employer in the city, it's darn close. And I mean, that's problematic. You got a $400 million tax-funded enterprise as your number one employer in the city. And here's the real kicker, right? 2/3 of the cops don't live in town. About half to 2/3 of the firemen don't live in town. More than half of the teachers don't live in town. So all these people who are making these fairly substantial incomes from the taxpayers of the city of Manchester are all living in the more well-to-do suburbs. All right, so looking at the clock. Now, Eddie got me talking about the superintendent's presentation, and here it is, folks. This is all 159 pages of it that was on the agenda the other night, and I want you to know I've read every single page, and we're going to discuss it here. Now, there's a lot that I could go into here, but I'm focusing primarily on the costs that I believe are embedded in the superintendent's proposals. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I think the way this has been presented is a bit like the way a car is sold, right? We've all been there, right? Especially when we're a little newer, a little wet behind the ears in the process of buying a car. We walk into the showroom, the salesman comes over, hey, what you looking at? And then he's like, oh, I've got the perfect car for you. It talks it up. Let's go take it for a test drive, right? Take it for a test drive, kind of get you to fall in love with the vehicle. And then you start talking numbers. They get you to a point where like, no, my budget is this, but it's not that much more. I really want it. So it's a bit of a sales job that was given the other night. And so what I noticed in going through the presentation, though, was despite the fact that he literally Dr. Goldhart punted and said, gee, we're going to do all this community outreach and maybe we'll amend this. And, if the school board adopts it, whether it's as we presented it or it's amended, then and only then will we provide cost estimates. Unfortunately for the superintendent and everybody else who thinks that this is a great plan, and there are parts of the plan that I do like. And, in the document were two things. There was a demographic study, which shows that the school district is going to continue to lose students for at least the next decade, and they're projecting another 12% loss in students, which is roughly another 1,500 kids. And the MGT facility study. Now, this is the facility study. This is, I think, its third time back before the board, right? This is, something they paid tens of thousands of dollars for, the experts. And inside of that facility study were the costs of new construction. They broke it all down by, how much square footage each kid should have at each level, how much the median cost in New England is to build elementary, middle, and high schools. So I was able to do math using all of the stuff that was provided in this to come up with the numbers I am now going to share with you. Brendan, the slides, please. Okay, so costing out the superintendent's facilities recommendations, there's a reason he didn't put numbers to the proposals. Next slide. The methodology behind the math. It was taken from their own documents. Dr. Goldhart's recommendations contained the revised and final facility study conducted by MGT Consulting Group. The study identified the median per square foot cost of new construction in New England as $387.50 for a high school and $400.36 for an elementary school. It also identified the number of square feet that should exist per child as 193 per high school student and 214.2 per elementary school student. Next slide. The methodology, what I did with the numbers in their own documents. For new construction, I multiplied the recommended or an estimated number of students by the recommended amount of square footage per student, then multiplied it by the per square foot cost. For most renovations, I used the amounts in the facility study. The facility study, you should know, identified $92 million in renovations and broke down each school by the type of renovation that should be done and how much it would cost. For other renovations, I used the building square footage where available and multiplied it by 1/2 of the new construction cost. How did I come up with that? I came up with that talking to various architects and drawing off my own experience as a member of the Finance, Buildings and Sites, and Joint School Buildings Committees when I was on the school board. Anyway, for the estimated number of students, I used the figures contained in the Davis demographic study, which was also contained in the documents provided by Superintendent Goldhart. Next slide. Mega Manchester High School. It was the centerpiece of the recommendations. A 3,500 student school, comfortably. By the way, not for nothing, we only have 3,500 high school students in Manchester right now. Times 193 square feet per student equals 675,000 square feet. Times $387.75 per square foot equals a total cost of $261,925,125. Note, okay, why pay for a study if you're not going to follow it, right? The MGT facility study recommended closing Central and renovating West to handle both populations at a total cost, this is the renovation cost of West, of $8.9 million. Next slide, please. Renovate Memorial to be the new MST. The plan is to have capacity for 1,000 students. Memorial has 182,528 square feet. Half the new construction cost is $194 times 182,528 equals $35 million to renovate Memorial to be the new MST. And when Joyce Craig was pushing to make West the new MST during the last facilities study, the numbers that were brought forward by the architect then, Fred Matuszewski, were not too far from what these numbers were, so I'm really confident in that number. Next slide. Renovate the classical and PA buildings at Central, which becomes the home of an arts school and the district offices. The MGT facility study pegged the full renovation cost of Central High at $16.7 million. If the classical and PA buildings are half of Central's space, and I don't know if it is or not, then the estimated cost of these renovations might be $8.3, almost $8.4 million. However, if we apply half of the construction cost at $194 times 1/2 of Central's total square footage, which is 135,000 square feet, then the estimated renovation cost here is $26,196,014. Note, the facility study provided the total square footage for Central, not the individual square footage of its 4 buildings, thus the 50% estimates. Next slide, please. Renovate MST to be the new pre-K. It will make 21 elementary classrooms available around the city. MST is a high school with very specialized space. Renovations are likely to be extensive to convert this very specialized building into space suitable for children aged 3 to 5. Nonetheless, we will adhere to our general approach to estimates. MST has 110,000 square feet. Half the cost of new elementary construction is $200.18 per foot. Therefore, the cost to renovate MST to be the new preschool is $22 million. Next slide. The remodeling. Goldhart called for the remodeling of several schools. So I pulled the remodeling numbers, the renovation numbers out of the MGT study. Jewett Street, $1.2 million. Parker Varney, which is at 60% capacity, $3.4 million. Green Acres, $4.2 million. Webster, $3.2 million. Smith Road, $4.8 million. Webster and Smith, Goldhart called for extensive remodeling, but did not define what it was, so these estimates for them may be low, because I don't know what extensive remodeling means. Next. New elementary schools. Yes, he called for many new schools. We compared them to the MGT study renovation cost. The new Gosler Park would be a bigger 2-story school to alleviate crowding at Northwest, which is kind of funny because you don't have any crowding at Gosler and you have even less crowding at Parker Varney. So if we need to alleviate crowding at Northwest, why wouldn't we just redistrict and move the kids? But I digress. I estimated based on the need to take kids out of Northwest and the number of kids at Gosler Park, 500 students at $214.20 per foot. That's 107,000 square foot school times $400.36 means the new Gosler Park would cost $42.9 million, versus the estimate to completely renovate it at $4.6 million. So there's a $38.3 million difference between the cost to build and the cost to renovate. Next slide, please. The new Wilson School would have to be much bigger to handle current enrollment based on their numbers in the facility study. We estimate 600 students because there are about 550 there now at $214 per square foot. That gives us 128,520 square foot school times $400.36. Bang! $51 million to build the new Henry Wilson School. MGT's estimate to completely renovate the existing facility is $3.5 million. That's a cost difference of $48 million. Next slide, please. Okay, Goldhart recommends closing Weston Elementary and combining it with McDonough on the McDonough school site. Of course, we'd have to rename McDonough because we couldn't continue to call it McDonough. He suggests either renovating the existing McDonough with an addition or building a brand new building. I had no way to estimate the cost of renovation plus addition, so I simply did the new cost on 900 students because that's what the two schools have combined. It's just shy of 900 kids times $214.20 per square foot gives us 193,000 square foot building times $400 a foot. $77 million. Completely renovating Weston would be I'll call it $1.5 million. Completely renovating McDonough would be $3.2 million for a $72,500,000 difference between building new and renovating the existing. Next up, total estimated cost of Dr. Goldhart's recommendations, please sit down, ranges from $516,201,006 to $534,027,550, and the range considers the different estimates given on the renovations to Central, which don't consider the recommended demolition costs for the James building or the recommended renovation to the Burns building to turn it into affordable housing for district teachers. That was in the recommendations. Next slide, please. So is there a precedent for such a program? There is, and we're still paying for it. In 2003, the Board of School Committee and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen approved a massive upgrade program that renovated and expanded all three high schools and put additions onto the middle schools. Despite the fact that all three high schools continue to incur ongoing repair and maintenance costs and have a combined renovation cost of over $30 million identified in the MGT study, the taxpayers will continue to pay annual debt service in the amount of $7.4 million until fiscal 2028. Another 7 years to pay for this 2003 project that cost only $100 million. Folks, we need to rethink these renovations. So, now, just doing a little math, if we use those numbers, that means the debt service on this program would be $35 million. Of course, in 7 years, $7.5 million, call it $7 million is going away. So there's only a net increase after 7 years of $28 million in our debt service. And I'm bringing this to your attention because part of what's being discussed by Dr. Goldhart is how much money we'll save, because MGT estimated we were spending $1.3 million on unnecessarily on vacant space, which Dr. Goldhart wants to channel back into the budget to do things like buy textbooks and things like that. Okay, fine. I don't think you're going to have much of a textbook line if your debt service goes up by that much. And let's just say you don't buy my numbers. Let's cut them in half. You're looking at more than $250 million, which is, okay, so if the bond was a 20-year bond for the $100 million program that was passed in 2003, times 7.4, you're paying back $150 million on a $100 million loan. That's pretty steep. So if you do that same math, you're going to more than double. You're going to be at about $18 to $20 million a year in debt service for this. And as I think it was Peter Perrick from Ward 8, as one of the school board members brought up last night, Gee, Dover built a great big shiny new school, and now Dover's having trouble paying for its operating expenses because they're drowning in the debt service of the shiny new school. Look, I'm not here to tell you that that our schools don't need renovation or some repair work. Fact is, though, that this study that MGT did, I actually felt pretty good about the city's effort to maintain the buildings because the vast majority of our school space was considered, good, in good condition, and they actually complimented the city on the efforts that it has put forward to maintain and upgrade its buildings. So the idea that kids are walking into these dilapidated spaces that are going to fall on them and kill them, I don't think really rings accurately. I don't think it rings true. The point is, and it's really great, I wrote this down, because Goldhart in his presentation emphasized that what goes on inside a school regarding teacher quality, student learning, and a positive climate are the most important things. Well, if they're the most important things, why is he talking about $500 million in school construction and renovation work? That's enormous. And it has nothing to do with what's going on inside of the building. So, it's kind of funny. This is like, Yogi Berra said, it's deja vu all over again. When I ran for mayor in 2001, I put two things on the table. I put a plan to completely take care of all of the deferred maintenance costs that had been identified at the time by the Parsons-Brinkerhoff study. It was $35 million. I figured out a way to pay for it. It would have literally had, between state and federal funding that was available, it would have had zero impact on the property tax payer. Because the way the financing was structured, there were these things called Z-bonds from the federal government. There was building aid from the state. Not a penny would have come out of the Manchester taxpayer's pocket to pay for that $35 million in renovations. Well, Bob Baines had to one-up me in the competition. During the thing, he came out with a $105 million plan, which is ultimately what they ended up putting through. And that plan, though, didn't touch the elementary schools, only did additions to the middle schools, and it did renovate and put on additions that at the time, projections from the Manchester City Planning Department said were unnecessary because they had projected a decline in enrollment that ultimately was seen. And the school district didn't like those projections, so it stopped using the planning department to make them. And here we are, almost 20 years later, still paying $7.5 million, and the high schools that took the lion's share of the money now have $30 million more in deferred maintenance. This is a crazy way to do things, folks. So my contention is we need to figure out what we want to have happening in the schools. That gets me back to my choice system. And we need to figure out, once we know what we want to have happening in the schools, which schools are going to be viable, the physical plants that are going to be viable, and take it from there. But it's a good thing we're at the end of the show, because I'm speechless. Still your ever humble host, Rich Girard. As always, proud to have in the audience. Thanks for being there. Until next week, be good, be well. Don't do anything we wouldn't do. We'll have a brand new show next week. Be sure to tune in. Thanks.